The following program does not necessarily represent the views and opinions of Reality Radio 101, its advertisers and sponsors, or its listening audience. Listener discretion is advised. Good evening and welcome to this House of Musicians with your host, singer, songwriter, and founder of the band, Inner City Outlaws, the baritone bear, Barry Smith, right here on Reality Radio 101. To get on board right now, send us an email. Our email address is thishouseofmusicians@gmail.com. And now, right to your host of this House of Musicians, Barry Smith.
Hey, folks. Welcome to this House of Musicians radio show on Reality Radio 101. We hope you enjoy the next hour with us as we do our small part to promote musicians, bands, and venues. Gary, how you doing?
Hanging in there, buddy.
Good, man. Glad to hear that. I'm stoked today. We have Keith Glass on our show this evening, and I'm stoked to talk to Keith, play a couple of his songs. Say hi to Keith, Gary.
Hello, Keith. How are you?
I'm great, Gary. How are you? And where are you guys? You're in Toronto, right?
We're outside of Toronto. We're east of Toronto. Actually, the studio is in Oshawa area, and Mr. Barry is in Bowmanville, I believe.
Yep. I'm in Bowmanville, right here in the heart of Durham, Bowmanville, Ontario. So there you go.
Right on.
Keith,
well,
how are you, bud?
I'm great, man. I'm great. I'm just south of Ottawa.
Wow, south of Ottawa. Good. And how long have you been out that way?
Let's see. 30, almost 30 years, coming up on 30 years. I moved out to the Perth area in 1991, and I moved to my current location just off the Rideau River, south of Ottawa, about 12 years ago, 13 years ago. So, yeah.
Good for you. That's great. And so how long have you been doing music, I guess, for many, many years?
Many, many, many years. I guess I've been a professional musician, which I define as making a living doing it, since about 1970. Yeah, 1970, 71. Yep.
Good for you. 70, 71. I was probably about 6 or 7 years old then. And so how long?
Coincidentally, so was I. That's when I started. I was that young. Yeah.
Good for you. And so who were you influenced by when you were younger, Keith?
Well, that's a great question. And I'm not saying that because that's what you say in interviews. I don't know if you noticed that, but that's what you say. That's a great question. I'm so glad you asked that. No,
good.
I would say the interesting thing is that having grown up in an era when music was kind of, shall we say, unbounded, unlabeled, really, when I started listening to music in the 50s and the 1960s, I mean, everything was rock and roll that I was interested in, I should say. So my influences were pretty broad, I mean, from the obvious ones like Chuck Berry and Little Richard and Elvis, and then along came the British invasion. But I also, I don't know, I had a healthy background in like jazz and big band music through my parents, and so I think anybody of a certain generation, my generation, that is, those of us who were born in the early 50s, was exposed to a really broad spectrum of music, and it so compartmentalized and formatized, if you will. Mm-hmm. So, same thing to me. I can write I can equally enjoy a country song as I can a heavy metal song or a heavy rock song. I mean, to me, I love. I just love it all. I just love music.
And so do I. Same thing. I was raised on country music, Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, George Jones, Merle Haggard. That was all my dad listened to. And of course, as we turn into teenagers and start hanging out with friends, and Sabbath came out and or got introduced to Black Sabbath and Zeppelin, you're like, wow, what's this stuff? So I'm kind of in the same boat as you, but and for the folks out there, just let me say to you that Keith is a founding member, guitarist, and songwriter with Prairie Oyster, a group which enjoyed a very long and successful career, critical acclaim, including multiple Juno and CMA awards. They're often cited as country's foremost roots country band, tour extensively in Canada, the U.S., and Europe over a career spanning almost 4 decades. And in 2008, you guys were inducted into the Canadian Country Music Hall of Fame and also received SOCAN Songwriters Life and Achievement Award, which is outstanding, Keith. Good for you. So now you're growing up. When did you first play live, do you think? Or what instrument did you first get involved with and then maybe play live at a school function or something or wherever it was?
Easy. I first was attracted to the guitar when I was probably 11 or 12, and I played guitar off and on for a few years, but didn't really get traction with it, shall we say. Mm-hmm. And then my first band when I was probably 14, growing up in a town called King City, also in the great GTA, I was the default bass player.
Default,
and so I played bass, and then in high school, in music class, I took upright bass, and probably because it came easily to me. And to this day, I still play it. I still don't own one, but if I'm called for a session or need to play upright bass on something, I can do it. And I'm no Ray Brown or anything like that, but I can play. But yeah, guitar. Then I reinvented myself as a guitar player after that, and played in kind of sort of bluegrassy, country, everything. I would say my first paying gig was with my friend Bob, whose dad had a gig at the Aurora Legion, and we were about 16, I guess.
Cool.
And he played in the Aurora Legion, playing piano on the weekends. And one night he asked us to come and play guitar with him because we knew all the old Merle Haggard songs and all the old Eddie Arnold and Ray Price tunes that he would do. And we could sing him. He was just strictly a piano player, instrumentalist. And we got up and played guitars with him and sang all these Ray Charles tunes, or not Ray Charles, I should say Ray Price, right. and Hank things and stuff like that. So my early influences were, as you said, like country stuff, but also, Elvis and the Beatles and all that stuff. It just all was I just saw it as music. I didn't really divide it into categories at that time because nobody else really was,
Absolutely. And were you singing at that time too when you got up and played guitars?
Yep.
At that age?
Yeah. I've always been a singer. I actually was one of those weird kids who was coerced into joining the church choir when I was and became the soloist in the choir. I know by hearing me sing now, but I had to learn how to read and sing and do all that stuff in a very hoity-toity Anglican church choir when I was really young.
Good for you, and you know what? I'm sure it helped.
Well, it didn't hurt.
Oh, sure, it helped. Yeah, absolutely. So now when did you form your first band?
Well, I think probably 15, 16, maybe younger. I don't think I was in high school. So what would that make me? 12, 13, something like that. When we were playing in my parents' basement. In fact, the original drummer was just here visiting me from Calgary a couple of weeks ago. He was passing through visiting family on a road trip, and he stopped, and we had a socially distant long lunch visit. But yeah, I bet you I was about 12 or 13.
When you started your first band?
Yep.
How cool is that? Do you remember what the band was called?
A Taste of the Good Life.
That is too cool, man.
From an old R&B song by, I want to say, all I need is a taste of the good life. That's all right. Oh, who was that?
Okay, there you go.
It was definitely a Toronto sound band. I can't think who. Might have been John Lee and the Checkmates or somebody like that.
That's awesome, man. And so now you're playing around. So now, how old were you when you think you got your first gig? I mean, I'm going way back here, I know, but.
Okay, so other than the first gig where, my buddy and I went and played with his dad, and I don't think we actually got paid for that, so maybe it doesn't count. The first gig was probably, do you know of a little community called Tottenham, north of Toronto?
Tottenham, yes.
Yeah, up near Schaumburg and Alliston and that area. We played the Tottenham Inn, myself and the same guy, Bob, whose dad we played with, and my friend Russell, who we went on to form King City Slickers together. We had a little trio, and we played sort of folky, country rock, bluegrassy kind of stuff. And we played the Tottenham Inn when we were about 18, maybe. And that's what I would count as the first paying gig. So the first time we played, and we were obviously underage because the drinking age was 21 then, but the owner sort of turned the other cheek and turned a blind eye, I should say. And that was that. And then I was hooked.
And then you were hooked, man. Once you hear those first couple of people clapping when you're at the end of a song, you're like, wow, eh?
Yeah, and the huge money. Let's face it. In the music industry, you can make tens of dollars.
Yeah, I know. I've been there and done that. And that's actually, I don't know if I actually made any money. I think I owed the bar money at the end of each gig. Yeah, that's what
that happened. That happened.
Absolutely. So now you're 18, you got a band and you're playing around. Let's talk about, I guess, are you guys rehearsing a lot? Are you writing your own material at this point?
No, absolutely not. We were really just, sponging up everything that we heard and trying to regurgitate it in a palatable form, and like everybody else does when you're that age. And I don't know, the writing thing never really hit me till many years later, probably not until my late 20s did I realize, or mid 20s did I realize, oh yeah, somebody has to write this stuff. Maybe I could. And I started dabbling at writing. But to be honest, I haven't really, I've written all my life since that time, but it's only really got off onto a real, what should I say, a more serious thing in the last, I'd say, 10, 20 years, probably the last 20 years, where I really feel like I've come into my own as a songwriter, which maybe I was just a slow starter, but, I write a lot now. Not when I say a lot, I mean, I kind of constantly have a song or two that I'm working on and, just keep churning it out.
Sure. And what's your writing process? I know for me, I usually, since the cell phone, I usually, will, pick up my guitar and play a riff or two, something that I like at the moment, and then maybe, 2 or 3 different riffs, and then leave it alone for a couple of weeks and maybe come back and listen to that riff again. And if I still like it, turn that right into a complete song. What's your writing process?
Very similar. Typically, it almost always comes this way, and it always has. It'll be like I don't know, like the hook of the song, the hook line, and the melody will come to me like that. Boom. Like you're going to play a song in a while, but that boom, might as well throw it away. That came to me just like that was it. And then, an hour later, I had the song finished and banged out a quick demo down in my basement studio and sent it off to the guys in the band. Said, "What do you think?" They don't always come that easy, but it does tend to always be hook, melody, chord structure. It all just kind of comes together, and then I have to fill in the lyrics, and that is just a matter of, it's a process, right? You just work at it. When I was younger, And when Prairie Oyster had first got signed to a Nashville record label, I don't know, for whatever reason, the record label decided that, I seemed to have some potential as a songwriter. And they used to fly me down to Nashville and put me up in a hotel for a couple of weeks at a time and set up writing appointments with me.
That's fabulous.
With established Nashville songwriters,
That's great.
And that was it was cool. It was a very bizarre process from somebody who had never, ever done that sort of thing before. But it was absolutely interesting. And if it did nothing else, it certainly showed me what the discipline of songwriting was and what the process was and could be. And because that's what these people did. They were certified, bona fide, salaried songwriters. They worked in the Tower of Song every day. They got up in the morning and had breakfast just like our dads used to do, and then took off for work. Only their work was going somewhere and sitting in a room and writing songs, either by themselves or with somebody like me, some putz from Canada who was sent down to help churn out some songs for our next record. It was a very interesting time.
What a job. Yeah, man. I can just picture in my head, they flying you down there. You're sitting in a room at a desk with one chair and a notepad and a paper, and they come in suits.
And a little cassette deck.
Okay, and a little cassette that maybe you're singing it as you go or talking it as you go like a poem. I just see it as so, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like an assembly line kind of thing where they come. No, it's not.
You know what, Barry? It actually wasn't. I can totally get your image of it being like that, and I probably at the time was afraid it was going to be like that. But in fact, everybody was sort of like, they're just chumps like you and me, and it was like, I remember writing with a guy named Radney Foster of a band called Foster and Lloyd, and he was just a guy in a band just like me, but he happened to have a publishing deal in Nashville, and so I went to his house. I went to Paul Kennerly's house. Paul Kennerly at the time was just getting divorced from Emmylou Harris.
Wow.
And anyway, but
I can imagine there were some good songs that came out of that then.
there was an actual really good song that came out of that ended up being a number one hit for Prairie Oyster. But
good.
You just sit around and say, hey, you got any ideas? Be like you and me sitting in a room together with two acoustic guitars and going, what are you thinking about? Or and half the time you got a little notebook with you with some scratch notes and da-da-da-da-da, and
for sure
she thinks I'm still blah, blah, blah. And then you start, hey, that's a good idea. What about this? And then you start writing, and then you start riffing, and before you know it, hopefully you got a song.
Yeah, and
it's a cool.
That's
different process
cool.
from what most of us are used to. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, and it's I guess it's so hard for a lot of people to realize that there are people that's what their 9 till 5 job is to write songs, because
sure.
for artists, I mean. That's amazing. Now, Keith, let's talk about later on. Now you had a band when you were 18. You're playing covers with a band, and now let's move ahead a little bit to how how popular Prairie Oyster was. I mean, I remember listening to them when I was younger, and now here I am talking to one of the founders. It blows my mind. But anyway, let's talk about how all that formed and became to be, and then maybe talk about doing your first album with Prairie Oyster.
Well, okay, a couple of funny things. So myself and the lead singer / bass player of Prairie Oyster, we were we shared singing responsibilities, and he played bass and I played guitar. We grew up together in King City. We literally knew each other from the time we were babies because our parents were friends.
That's great.
And his name's Russell DeCarl. And so we started playing together when we were teenagers. And the band I mentioned earlier that we played our first gig at the Tottenham Inn for, I think, $20 each for a trio. So we had been playing together, and we formed a little bluegrass band when we were in our very early 20s called the King City Slickers. And we played sort of the festival circuit, and we played clubs. Man, we played clubs like the Gasworks. I don't know if you remember the Gasworks.
Of course. They had the big beers.
Sure. I mean, all the rock bands in town played there. Flood played there. Gatto played there. Probably Rush played there in the early days. I mean, Rough Trade played there. And then us, this like 4-piece bluegrass band, banjo, guitar, bass. Anyway, so cool. We had a weird little career. We were these long-haired hippie guys playing bluegrass music, and that sort of ran its course. And I guess by 1974, we'd kind of run that out, and we'd met some really interesting guys, a really great fiddle player and a really great pedal steel guitar player in Peterborough when we were playing out there one time. And all of us were sort of just kind of realizing that the projects we were in were sort of winding down, and said, I'd love to play with you. I'd love to play with you. We should get together and try something new. And we did. We just got together and started jamming, and it turned into Prairie Oyster. And we, and it became almost immediately this 6-piece band. So there was myself and Russell, he on bass, and Dennis on steel, Zeke on fiddle, and then we found a great piano player named Ted Brown who played piano, obviously, and my oldest friend, one of my oldest friends, on drums, who'd been in a rock band with me in high school, when we used to cover nothing but Hendrix and Cream, pretty much. Cool. So, as I said, I've had kind of a weird mixed up things. A year after that band, I was in a bluegrass band. But so he became the first drummer, and coincidentally, he's the drummer that plays with me now and is on those recordings I sent you. He's in the Keith Glass band now. But That's a long, long story. Anyway, so Prairie Oyster, we just kind of putzed around and played clubs around Toronto and all over Ontario. A couple of little quick forays out of the province that, never amounted to much. And by 1978, we'd kind of run our course, after 4 years, and kind of things weren't going anywhere. But 2 years later, somebody, and I'm sorry to say I can't remember who, it might have been Derek Andrews at Albert's Hall, said, I'd really like you guys to do a reunion gig. Like, would you put the band back together and do this? And we went, yeah, okay. So we did. And so 80, 81, we kind of reformed the band. There were a couple of personnel changes, but we did it. And before we knew it, we were doing it again, and it was a little more concerted this time. And we decided we should try to record. So we made, and here's an interesting thing. There was a radio station in Richmond Hill, Ontario, called CFGM, and it was a country station. And they'd always been in my, how will I say? I'd always been aware of them, listened to CFGM and growing up, and they were really supportive of the band. And so they actually said, look, if you don't make a record, you're crazy. If you make a record, we'll play it on our radio station. And so one of the DJs actually helped produce the first single. And lo and behold, they played it on the radio, and it was a hit, like a minor hit, obviously, local hit. But then things just grew from that. And eventually, within a few years, we had a full record with Stony Plain Records out of Edmonton. But Holger Peterson's label, Holger of Saturday Night Blues fame, on CBC Radio. And then a couple of years after that, 3-4 years after that, our manager, we were touring all over Canada, and our manager said, you know what, we should take a shot and send a demo to a couple of Nashville labels. And in fact, I even talking about this stuff just kind of blows my mind to remember it all. Our piano player, Joan Besson, with whom I was just talking today, actually, her partner at the time was a guy named Gene Taylor, great piano player from Texas, who was living in California, in LA, and he would occasionally play with a band called the Blasters. And he also played with Ricky Nelson right up until when Ricky passed away and had the plane crash. But anyway, Gene knew the Los Lobos guys really well. And so we got talking to Steve Berlin, who was is the sax player with Los Lobos and keyboard player, and asked him if he would produce a couple of demos for us. So he came up to Toronto, produced a couple of demos. We sent them off to Joe Galante at RCA Records in Nashville, and he said, "I want to sign you guys." And it was just that. I know that sounds absurd, but it was that simple. Like it was like we didn't have to send 1,000 demos off to 1,000 record labels. We sent it to one record label, and the guy said, "Yeah, I want this. Let's do it." And that was
amazing. Fabulous.
Yeah. So accidents do happen.
Accidents, I don't know, yeah. And then so he says, "Okay, I want to sign these guys, get them down here, or let me get up there and let's get an album done." Was that how that went?
They let us make the record in Toronto.
That's so cool.
And actually, we made it in Hamilton at Grant Avenue, and Steve Berlin from Los Lobos came up and produced it, and that was that. That was the first record, and it was like, okay, it was really a weird record. It was not like a mainstream country record, nothing like what was coming out of Nashville at all, but it had a couple of songs that had some legs, and I think we made 3 more records with them before they realized we were not going to become a mainstream, top selling American style country act, but it was
huge
a lot of
in
fun.
Canada.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as pretty much as I guess as big as it could get in Canada, and we certainly toured all over North America, and I think we played as much in the States as we did in Canada for several years, and all through the 90s, and it was a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Yeah, man, I bet so. So after you did the first album in Toronto, now did things really change after that for you as far as moving forward as a musician? Like maybe more money, maybe touring, a lot more tours, opening for superstars. Like what is that? Was it? Did that come after the first album?
Not after the very first. Well, after the first Nashville record, shall we call it a Nashville record because it was on a Nashville label? Yes. Yep. And basically all the things you just mentioned. I mean, touring got to be a lot more palatable because we could tour in a tour bus for the most part, or fly, and we could have a small road crew to handle all the grunt work and a sound, a steady sound person and a lighting guy and all that stuff. And it was a professional level thing. How did it change us as musicians? Well, I don't know if the trajectory changed somewhat in that I think, there was a wee bit of pressure from the label to try to be more radio friendly, but I don't think it was, I'm often, in hindsight or retrospect, I don't think it had so much to do with our sound as it did. And this is going to sound, I hope it doesn't, but it's probably going to sound somewhat sour grapey. But I know for a fact, because I was told, that everything in the States is sort of, at least in the radio world, you're beholden to the program directors, and there was this sort of feeling that a band from Canada with a name like Prairie Oyster, which means bull's balls, is kind of irreverent. There's an irreverence about it, and so it was a tough row to hoe to get radio airplay, to be accepted by mainstream radio in the States. Does that bother me? Not really. Although we all became hundredaires instead of millionaires, but big deal.
Right.
Life's not about that. Life's about playing music.
Yeah. Hey, man, you know what? In my book, I will say, which is one of my sayings that I say to certain artists, and that is, you guys built a house that we all grew up in. I remember listening to Prairie Oyster when I was young, and like I say, I'm honored to have you on the show, Keith. We have an email from Chris L. Chris just simply asked, how did Prairie Oyster come up with the name?
I should just give you the guy's number. Okay, so the aforementioned drummer, who I grew up with, like I think we started high school together, and then we ended up playing in like a heavy rock band after that, and then he became the first drummer in Prairie Oyster. So when we were rehearsing for our very first official Prairie Oyster gig, we didn't have a name yet, and we had the gig booked at this club. We'd rehearsed, we had a big repertoire of tunes, and it was going to be our first big coming out thing as this band. And we're sitting in his parents' place, and his mom was this wacko character. She was a character, and I won't get into it, but she was a character. And we were sitting between, songs in a rehearsal in their rec room or wherever it was. What the heck are we going to call ourselves? Like, what are we going to, like, we need a name. And he says, "Hey, Mom, got any ideas for a name?" And she walks by, okay, so she's got a drink in one hand and a plain and sweet cap in the other hand between her fingers. And she says, "How about Prairie Oyster?" She was a really, and we went, "Oh, that's good. What does it mean?" She says, "Bull's balls," and walk away. We went, "Wow, that'll do. That'll work." So it was Alistair Dennett's mom, Pam, who gave us the name, Chris. That's the answer to the question.
Yes,
and Alistair and I still play music together, and Pam's, often off in some heaven somewhere, smoking and drinking up a storm, I guess. She was a wonderful, wonderful lady.
That's amazing, man. And and those stories that you just told me right there is the reason I do this show and have artists on the show. That's a great story, bud. Now, let me just read one more email for you real quick, and then we're going to move ahead. This one is from Eric M. And Eric says, "Hi, absolutely love Prairie Oyster's music. Genius. Any plans for Keith to tour with this COVID thing? Would love to see him live here in Orlando, Florida."
Ooh, hey, Orlando. Well,
don't we wish we were there with the ones that are coming up?
I do. Hey, Eric, I can tell you directly, Eric, I would love to. I hope that the world somehow gets back on its axis. And I know I swore to Barry that this wouldn't be political at all. I suspect, though, politics and coronavirus aside, the logistics of touring anymore are, take those things out of the equation. And it's still really, really hard. I mean, the band I currently have, we don't have the cachet of a band like Prairie Oyster. It's not like I can phone up our agent or our manager and say, "Hey, let's tour next fall. I want to do Orlando, da 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 da, and then I'd like to do a West Coast sweep." You just can't do that anymore. And the bands that are doing that are either super high established acts already, or they're 20-somethings who are willing to sleep on people's couches and play in a club and split the take at the end of the night. And there's 4 bands, and they each walk out with $100 per band, or a few $100 per band. I'm exaggerating probably, but times have changed, and there's a million reasons why they have. But the financial aspect of the music industry has been gutted. It's either you're in the top 10% or you're nowhere, man. It's really hard to make a living playing music. Always was, but it got exponentially harder with free downloading and all the other things that just kind of took the guts out of the live playing world as well at the same time. So, short answer, Chris, no.
Yeah, no, that's a real short answer for sure. And you're right. You're right, Keith. The music industry is totally a different thing now, and it's hard. The happiest musicians nowadays are, like you say, the ones in the top 10%, or the guys that are constantly playing every weekend at a bar, making their $300 for 3 nights. And that's not even right now with of course COVID going on, and that's just what it's come down down to. I mean, the streaming thing, it's easy to get music now. People don't pay for it. Some people, I'm not saying all, some people do pay for it. Some people have integrity. They pay for music. Some people do not. It's easy to download it and get it. So it really has turned the music industry upside down on its head for sure.
It has. And you know, at the level at which I'm existing as a musician, you know, I have no interest in playing cover tunes per se anymore. I never really was a cover musician except for a brief period when I was first starting out. So
of course,
you know, that just compounds your problems because they're very, you know, they're like you mentioned, there are lots of weekend warrior bands out there, and I know lots of these guys, and they go out and they actually play all around this area in the odd club. Well, they did before the COVID. They play some clubs, and they get the occasional county fair sort of gigs and little mini festivals and stuff, and make decent dough. But they're doing 100% cover stuff.
Yep.
And that's just not my thing. You know,
me neither.
Which is not to say when I get together with my guys, you know, we have a house gig at a club that's like 2 minutes away from my house.
Cool.
2-minute drive, just the other side of the river. And once a month we just get together there, and that's an all holds barred sort of event. You know, like we will play every song I've ever written, maybe, but somebody might say, yeah, you guys haven't played a Beatles song all night. And so we'll do whatever Beatles song somebody yells out, or
of course,
do something with the Stones, or do you know any Hank Williams? Yes, I know every Hank Williams song. So, you know, I can do that, and we can do that, and it's kind of neat, you know, or do a Ray Charles cover, you know, it's fun to play it like that, but it's not what we're known for. I think we're known that we can play anything if we have to and want to, but it's because we want to, not because we have to.
Right, and it's nice to be versatile too. Sure, you love playing your originals. I love playing my originals. But when you're out in a club and there's 50 people in the club and they don't know your stuff, it's nice of you to play something that somebody yells out to. That also makes a good band.
Sure, absolutely.
Now, I know we talked about Prairie Oyster, very impressive stuff. You guys did really well. Like I say, I remember listening to it for many years when I was younger. So, cahoots and congrats to you on that. But I'm excited to talk about the band that you have now, the Keith Glass Band. So I want to dedicate the rest of the show to doing that. But before we do, let's right away play a song from your 2019 CD called The Easy Way. That was your album. It was called The Easy Way. And this is a song called Throw It Away. So I'd like to play it and then give a shout out to a couple of sponsors and then come back and talk about the Keith Glass Band.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, man. You're welcome. Let's do that. Folks, I have Keith Glass on the show tonight. This House of Musicians reality radio show. Again, you're listening to Keith Glass, and this is a song he wrote called Throw It Away, right here on Reality Radio 101.
Every heartache is the lesson no one ever learns. Well, even after the fire, something's bound to burn. It's so hard to get up and face another day. So take your broken heart, you might as well throw it away. You shed the same tears every single time you cry. Can't seem to find the time to let those teardrops dry. You're just a fool, you know that's what they're gonna say. So take your tears, you might as well throw them away. fooling around, but who you fooling? Tomorrow comes, it's just another day. Well, you might as well throw it away. Down, yeah, you say to dry your tears and get up and face another day. Well, you might as well throw it away. It's so hard to confess when you know you're as guilty as sin. Forget, turn around and just do it again. But it's too late, it doesn't matter what you say. Say your words, you might as well throw them away. Just a fool, you know that's what they're gonna say.
Hey, folks, welcome back to this House of Musicians. I have Keith Glass on the show tonight. Absolute honor to be speaking with Keith. We just played Throw It Away, which is from his 2019 album called The Easy Way. Keith, talk to me a little bit about how you formed the Keith Glass Band or the musicians that are playing in it, and talk to me a little bit about Throw It Away, how that came to be.
Well, let's see. The band. Okay, so I've, as I said, lived around this area just south of Ottawa for about 13 years. And coincidentally, my old friend, Alistair Dennett, drummer from Prairie Oyster, original drummer from Prairie Oyster, had just moved back to this same area from Winnipeg after being there for 30 years. So I was doing the odd solo gig and occasionally trying to put a few guys together to play some band gigs, but, you know, nothing really seemed to gel. But he and I often would just do gigs where he would play a full drum kit and I'd play acoustic guitar. And it was kind of crazy and fun because we could do anything. And but we really wanted to find the right combo of players. And we found a great bass player, a guy named Mike Turin, who had toured for years and years with Sue Foley, great Canadian blues player, singer, songwriter. And he was just an immediate perfect fit. And that started about 4 years ago, I guess. And then a couple of years later, a friend of his kind of fell into the fold. He's a sax player. And I have to admit that as much as he's a great sax player, I didn't really want a sax player in the band per se. I like sax, that was him playing on that tune. But I was really looking for a great keyboard player. And it turned out that he was also a really, really accomplished and great B3 player and piano. So, you know, he's a triple threat, and he's also a great writer. He writes a lot of stuff, and we've actually just been I've been trying to put lyrics to some of his he doesn't write lyrics. He's strictly an instrumental writer. But yeah, so we're trying to put some of that stuff together. But so, and as far as that song, that was just me riffing on the theme of what happens when you mess around too much. And, like I said earlier to you, I don't have any sort of, I guess
genre
phrase, genre problems. I don't have genre problems, Barry. Just so you know.
That's good. Good for you, but
no, but I mean,
very
like
versatility, man. That's the key. Look at the Beatles. Look at all the great bands.
Yeah, and so I'd love to. I will make sure that you have a copy of the entire record, the one we just talked about. The record's called "The Easy Way." The song "The Easy Way" is a really gentle, sort of Tex-Mex feeling song that I play acoustic guitar on, and it has organ, and it's really not at all like the song we just played, right? But then there's a pretty out and out rockin' tune on it called New Kind of Blues, and there's a real Los Lobos kind of inspired Tex-Mex rocker called Gone Away, which has a very political kind of vibe. I guess all I'm trying to say is that, I don't write as if I'm going to go, hey, we need to write a country record, or I want to write a record that's going to be all singer-songwriter. I just write songs as they come to me. And, if it's a country song, it's a country song. If it's a rock and roll song, it's a rock and roll song. If it's an out and out blues thing, that's what it is. And I don't judge it or try to put it in a box somewhere and put it aside for another time. And that's what I like about my band, and what has always been the goal of putting this band together is I want the people in my band to be able to play anything that I yell out, like, hey,
sure,
let's do this. And to that effect, when we've been, those aforementioned little house gig things that we do, they serve as kind of an interesting kind of rehearsal situation where,
of course, sure,
I will just I'll call it I'll say, do you guys know such and such a tune? And maybe they'll all say no, and I'll say, okay, it's in E, and here's the count, and away we go. And everybody's heard everything at some time in their life, and I want to play with guys that can say, sure, I can do that, and they can play the shit out of it. Pardon my French, but
absolutely.
So sure, if it's a Hank Williams tune, I expect them to be able to play the crap out of that, and if it's a Beatles tune, I expect them to be able to do that. Not in a dictatorial way, don't get me wrong, but they can do that. They can play anything, and it's fun and it's cool.
Yeah, and I love the versatility. I always love bands that are very versatile and can play different kinds and styles of music. I mean, like I know I'm not going to say all of the huge bands, but bands like the Beatles, bands like Led Zeppelin. I know Zeppelin was a rock band, but hey, man, they had a lot of different genres as well, versatility.
Sure.
So I really love that. Now, I want to talk about the next song we're going to play because it's totally different than Throw It Away. It's really groovy. And in my opinion, it's just a different, it's like you said, it's different than you play different kinds of styles of music. And I think this is one of those songs that would be stepping out of the genre range as far as being a country song or a bluegrass song. So let's go ahead and play it.
Yeah, I think of it as kind of a weird little blues thing, like a halftime blues, country blues kind of feel. Yeah. I play sort of a resonator slide guitar on it and stuff. Yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yeah, I feel it's like really an old style kind of song, and it's definitely got a nice groove to it. So let's go ahead and play that because I know our time is limited. I really have to make these shows longer, man. There's so much to talk about. But let's go ahead and play the next song, folks.
Thanks.
I have Keith Glass from the Keith Glass Band, KGB. Yep, that's what I said, KGB, the Keith Glass Band, on the show. Keith is on the show with us here right now, and we are going to play another one of his songs, and then we're going to discuss the song when we come back. This song is called Steppin' on My Blues by Keith Glass, right here on Reality Radio 101.
sometimes I got nothing else to do. I just got to say what's on my mind. The words are sometimes hard to find. Someone's always stepping on my blues. Sometimes dark, sometimes light, and sometimes not a soul in sight. Well, that's when you know that you got nothing to lose. But if you got trouble on your mind, you know that's what you're gonna find. 'Cause someone will be stepping on your blues. One step forward, two steps back. You know you're gonna break your mama's back. Only one way out, you know you got to choose. But someone will be stepping on your blues. You gotta lock that door, throw the key, walk away, maybe you'll be free. And no one will be stepping on your blues. But these days I just haven't got a clue. Look for a rainbow in the sky, you know it's gonna pass you by. Someone always stepping on your blue. One step forward, two steps back. You better look out, Jack, there's something coming down the track. There ain't no way out, you know you're gonna lose. Someone's always stepping on your blues. So just lock that door, throw away the key, walk away, maybe you'll be free. No one will be stepping on your blues. 'Cause if you got trouble on your mind, you know that's what you're gonna find. Someone always stepping on your blues. No, ain't nobody stepping on my blues. Ain't nobody stepping on my
blues. Hey folks, welcome back to this House of Musicians. I have founder of Prairie Oyster and now founder, of course, of the Keith Glass Band, Mr. Keith Glass on the show. Keith, again, honor to have you here. Let's talk about, we're going to go just a little bit late. Let's talk about Stepping on My Blues. I love the resonator, and I love how the resonator and the keyboards blend perfectly together.
Thank you. Thank you very much for saying so.
Great song.
The song is just like I said, it's just a throwback kind of country blues sort of feel in a halftime, and kind of funky and down low, swampy. I've been trying to do all my own recording for a few years now, and I think I'm getting more happy with the results as I go along. Now that song's not obviously, I wouldn't call that a final mix. It's as good as I could probably mix it at the time, and sort of a quick right off the desktop mastering job. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with the way that sounded. That's kind of cool. I haven't listened to it for a while. So. It's fine.
And so am I. I'm happy with it too. It's very professional. I always ask, you're welcome. I always ask the artist on the show, tell me one crazy story that's happened either on stage, on the road, in Nashville, Canada, Ottawa. Tell me something crazy that you can think of that's happened to you.
Well, I can tell you a bunch of them, but I'm going to tell you one that sticks out to me for a number of reasons, that just because it. Okay, I'm going to give you two. One was one night Prairie Oyster was playing in Niagara Falls, Ontario, as part of a sort of hands across the borders thing. It was on the July 1st / July 4th long weekend, and we were playing as part of a package with 3 other American acts, one of whom was Merle Haggard, one of my greatest idols of all time, like a huge influence on me as a player, as a musician, as a writer, I think. Anyway, so he watched our set, and I thought that was pretty freaking cool. And, usually the big headliner never leaves their backstage dressing room or the tour bus, but he watched our whole set from side stage, and, it was kind of cool. And then when he was on stage, one of his background singers, Bonnie Owens, I was watching from the side, and she looked over at me and kind of crooked her finger and said, come on out. And there was another microphone beside her. And so I just went, oh, well, I guess she's serious. So I went out, and this was about 3 songs into their set. And I ended up standing up there and singing harmony with her on every song for the next hour.
Wow.
And like the guys in my band were just like literally pooping their pants, just giggling from the side of the stage, like, holy shit, this is just crazy. And I went, yeah, I came off kind of stunned. And then there was an encore, of course, and she called me back out to come and join her to sing harmonies for the encore. I was like, this is just insane. And it was a weird thing because I knew every Merle Haggard song ever written. And I knew all the harmony parts, which, like, she didn't know that. She just kind of looked over to the side stage, pointed at me, and said, come, as if she knew.
Wow.
And that still will stand out as one of the most bizarre things that's ever happened to me. That and being backstage in a dressing room in Los Angeles one time at an award show and just waiting around the green room for our turn to go on. And Johnny Cash walked in, and I happened to be the first person that he encountered in the room, and he came over and stuck his hand out and said, hello, I'm Johnny Cash. And I went, I know.
Hello, hi. Hello, I'm Johnny Cash. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. That's pretty freaking obvious, dude. Anyway, so that's
how cool
is
that, Keith?
That's really cool.
Yeah, man, that's amazing. Now, that's a great story. A couple of great stories right there. Incredible. Good for you. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
You go ahead.
No, you go ahead. It's your show.
The show could go an extra hour here. Nope, you go ahead. Nope, you go ahead. Okay. I was just going to say, I got an email from Gail. Gail says, love the story about the band name, Prairie Oyster. Incredible. Love their music. Well, Gail, have a listen too now to the Keith Glass Band. You have 2 albums out, right, Keith?
I have an old record that I made, solo record, about almost 18 years ago or something like that. No, okay. I have an old record from 18 years ago. I have another one from 7 years ago called Bad Dog, which is really just, it was my first attempt to make a record completely on my own. I built a little simple home studio, had the most rudimentary stuff, couple of microphones, and made a record. And that record, you don't have it there, do you?
I don't have it here.
No, okay. I don't know what you were going to play then next.
No. We're just playing the 2 songs. Steppin' on My Blue was the last song that we just played. Yeah, but I was just thank you for the email, Gail. And there's a segment of the show I like that I like to do on each show, Keith, and it's called "Well, Gary, what do you think?"
What do I think? Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, you know what? I really, really like Keith's stuff. I've always liked Prairie Oyster's music as well. And even though I was not born and raised here in Canada, I used to listen to a lot of that down in New York, where I was born and raised. But I like Keith's take on, as you know, I'm in an original act as well, and because of COVID, no one's doing anything. But I like Keith's take on, doing original stuff, there's nothing like it. And even if you try to make a living and you can't, or you don't get signed, or A&R is not interested in you, the point is, when you go out and do these covers, it's all music, sure, that we love and grew up with, and it's other artists' original tunes. So to really be a true musician, you know my take on it, Barry. To me,
Sure.
do original stuff, show your creativity, write some stuff, record some stuff. And I like Keith's take on that, where he says, he's never really been a cover guy, so, kudos to that. So good luck with his future projects. And I think it would be great if he could tour again at some point in time. If he can get some money for tour support, that would be excellent.
Here. I like where you're coming from, Gary.
Thank you.
I will
Gary,
say this, though. I will say this, and it's by no means putting down what you said, but I also do have a great deal of respect for people who do play good cover tunes. You know what I mean? Like, that's how we all learn how to play.
And that's the key, Keith, is when you said good exactly cover right, tune. Yeah. When you said good cover that's tunes. Right. What turns off me, and not to interrupt you, but what turns me off is you go to see a band, have a couple of drinks at a pub or a bar, and they play the cover tunes horrendous, and it's just like I want to cringe and walk out. That's what's the turn off for me.
Yeah, well, there's no way of preventing that other than leaving.
Yeah.
Well, let's guys, let's just. Reality is that if you want to, I think a lot of pubs anywhere in Canada and the States, if you want to get a decent paying gig, I think the pub is expecting you to play. Unless you have an album out and you have a following, that's a different story. But if you're just an average band that plays in the pubs, which is great, I think they expect you to play cover songs. Maybe you can throw in the odd original. It's just part of being a musician.
Well, there's also, to me, there's a great deal of respect involved with covering somebody's tunes. You're basically saying, these are great songs, and we're going to try to do our best to cover them. And so I let's face it, you learn to play by covering other people's songs. And then eventually, hopefully, you grow into being a songwriter, but not everybody's got that in them. And that's just the way it is, too. So, but
sure.
I certainly respect those who do try to do it, and I just as much as I respect the songwriters. There would be no cover bands, though, if there weren't songwriters. So there you go.
Absolutely. And I also think that us songwriters, I know Gary's a songwriter, Keith, you're a songwriter, I'm a songwriter. A lot of our songs, I'll speak for myself here. I'm a huge J.J. Cale fan. There's songs that I'll sit down and write in that style because that's how I'm feeling at the moment, is to write a song like a J.J. Cale song. Now, not to copy one of his, but to write something like it. So I think all of our writing styles are influenced by other artists for sure.
You just hit a nail on the head there. I was just thinking about that song, Steppin' on My Blues. And man, if there was ever an influence, if I could say, an unconscious influence in that song, it would be J.J. Cale. It's that, that halftime. And I actually was a huge J.J. Cale fan myself, and opened for him a couple of times way, way, way back when. Oh my gosh!
Wow, man, you just keep coming out with all kinds of gems.
It was a century ago. Yeah,
that's amazing, buddy. Well, you know what? You've had a wonderful musical career with Prairie Oyster, and now you're the Keith Glass Band, and I can't wait to see what comes. I know you're going to be working, or you have a few songs now. I'm assuming that you are moving forward to come out with another album.
Yeah, I don't know how we're going to do it. We're just trying to figure it out because we were all set to go into. We decided this record we were going to go into a full-size studio, my buddy's studio in Ottawa, and do the whole record live off the floor in one day. But with the COVID restrictions, we can't do that now. So we're back to thinking, maybe we're going to piece it together. But I'm not really happy with that. That's how I've made the last couple of records. It works. You get half the band in the room and you do some of the stuff, and then keyboard player sends me his parts over the internet, and I mix them in and stuff, and his horn parts. But I want to be all in the same room at the same time. So it's just going to be we'll have to wait, and who cares? Like, it's not like we have a deadline. There's nobody breathing down our neck at the label saying, I need this record before Christmas. So ain't no thing.
Right.
We'll just make music, you know?
Absolutely. And you know what? We're going to continue to follow your progress. Thank you very much. It's an honor to have you on the show. I hope you'll come on the show again in the future, maybe when the album's done and we can promote the album, listen to some songs. Yes, thank you. And we play a couple of songs off the album when it's complete. And it would be, and as I say again, I'm going to say it, it's an honor to have you on the show, Keith. Thank you very much for spending some time with us.
It's an honor to be here. You have no idea how much I appreciate being asked. It's a pleasure.
Well,
Not as
we
good
look
as
forward
playing music, but talking about music is always great.
Absolutely. And thank you for the wonderful stories. This is one of the reasons I do this is, of course, to promote bands and venues and whatnot. But also, I always ask, tell me some good stories, and we always get some great stories. And you had a few doozies there. So we really appreciate that. Again, Keith, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure.
You're welcome. And to the listener, I say thank you for being here, and always dance and sing and let the music bring your soul to the surface for all the world to see. Until next time, have a shuffle your feet kind of week, and good night. You've been listening to This House of Musicians on Reality Radio 101.